It is time for StreetWise with former chief of the New York City Sheriff's Department, former chief of the Seagate Police Department, retired New York City detective, Time Warner Public Access Media Award, Joe Franklin Super Excellence in Broadcasting Memory Lane Award, New York Veteran Police Association StreetWise production, host of StreetWise, Mr. Lou Telano.
Good evening and welcome back to StreetWise. My guest this evening is a Fox News senior meteorologist, co-host, author, great author, some great books that you, which we might touch on that in a moment. But it's my pleasure to welcome to StreetWise, Janice Dean. Welcome to the show. Oh, thanks. We're on. We're having some fun here a little bit. So my guests don't mind. Okay, Janice, you're actually an advocate for tens of thousands of people that lost their lives as they were sentenced actually to death by Governor Andy Cuomo. How did that come about? How did you, obviously you had a tragic loss yourself when you lost your mother and father-in-law, Mickey and Dee. So I know it was also very personal as well. But to become an advocate, so how did that come about, Janice Dean?
Well, I'm not used to being in this position of being an advocate. I'm a reluctant advocate. But I feel that it's important because the governor was never being asked the questions of why he had a mandate, an order to put COVID positive patients into nursing homes for 46 days straight. Who gave him the advice to do that? Because that wasn't science-based. He even is on video saying putting COVID patients into nursing homes would be like spreading fire through dry grass. So he knew the risks, and yet he ordered COVID patients into nursing homes across New York. And the fact that he wasn't being asked the question when he would go on all of the various talk shows and radio programs was making me upset, because we didn't know that there was a mandate to put COVID positive patients into nursing homes until it was too late. And so when I saw the governor going on the various programs talking about his love life and his great leadership and never answering those questions, that's when I thought it was important for somebody who was living this nightmare to put a face on it, because no one was, and he wasn't answering the questions. And to this day, he still hasn't answered that question. He also hasn't given us the total number of deaths from our seniors that died in elder care facilities and also died in the hospital, like my mother-in-law. She got COVID in her elder care facility, but died in the hospital. But Governor Cuomo is the only governor, this is the only state that does not count the COVID patients that died in the hospital or elsewhere that got COVID in their assisted living or elder care facility. And then the other question I have that's never been answered is why weren't the federal government, the places that they gave to the governor, like the Comfort Ship and the Javits Center and the other makeshift hospitals, why weren't they used to put the overflow of patients instead of putting them in nursing homes?
Were you able to ask these questions when you testified in August with a bipartisan group in Albany? Were you able to ask those questions of the governor or I guess, Assembly and Senate leaders, what you just mentioned? Did you have an opportunity to address that, Janice Dean?
No, I was asked, I was supposed to tell my story, to testify. They had two separate hearings in August in Albany, and I was on the list to speak and tell my story the second week of August, and the invitation was rescinded because some of the lawmakers were uncomfortable with my testimony because where I worked. But they did allow me a few weeks afterwards to tell my story, but it was in front of mostly Republican lawmakers and certainly not in front of His Royal Highness.
He had the opportunity to use the Javits Center, the opportunity to use the boat that was the hospital ship on the west side of Manhattan, yet he chose to order them into the facilities that we're talking about. Why do you think he did that, Janice Dean?
And that's one of the questions that I have is, Why didn't he use these facilities that were given to him by the federal government for the reason of putting the overflow that they didn't want in the hospitals into these facilities that had doctors and nurses and the capability? Why didn't he use them?
Well, obviously, I would think it's because it was given to us by President Donald Trump. That's, it's political. I think a lot of people lost their lives because of these stupid politics. You have your thoughts on it? If you have any on it in regard to that?
I don't know, but I wish that some journalists would do some investigative reporting, because I think there could be a Pulitzer Prize in all of this. I think there were, I can only speculate. I've heard people say that because it was run by the military, that there was no money exchanged between hospitals and nursing homes. I believe there's probably a money trail involved. I also heard that hospital lobbyists were the ones that were whispering in his ear, telling him not to use those facilities, but to put them into nursing homes. So all of these things that I hear, I would love to have somebody do some real investigative journalism for me.
Well, the only ones that would do that is probably your station, Fox, and maybe Newsmax have to give, no one else is going to do that. They're not even discussing and it's no secret what we're talking about now. So your thoughts on, you mentioned Pulitzer Prize. Now, Andy Cuomo gets an Emmy, right, for his great work and what he's done in regard to what we're talking about. I got to ask you your thoughts on that. It's so ridiculous. It's like a comedy, even though it's terribly serious. What is your thoughts on that, Janice Dean, on him getting this great Emmy?
Nothing surprises me anymore with this governor and how he likes to celebrate himself.
Correct.
So, when you go, he started with the poster, the COVID Death Mountain poster that he was selling for $14.99. That was like a cartoon of the mountain that he flattened the curve, which, basically are the deaths that happened in New York. He made a poster out of them and put little cartoon icons of all of his favorite things, like his car and, the cotton swabs that he did with him and his brother on CNN. And one of his daughter's boyfriends hanging off the cliff. So I saw that and was disgusted. And then, of course, he has his book, his leadership book that was released in the middle of a pandemic. That was a New York Times bestseller. What governor has the time to write a book in the middle of a pandemic when thousands are dying? Governor Cuomo. And then the Emmy Award, I heard that to win an Emmy Award, you have to submit videotape of yourself to be judged by, the Emmy people who decide who wins the award. So he obviously took videotape of himself and his great acting ability as playing a role of governor of New York, and he won for that. So I'm not really surprised anymore. Last night he held a birthday celebration for himself with some of his buddies virtually, and raised tens of thousands of dollars for himself to line his pockets and re-elect himself in 2 years. So, it's just another example of him thinking he's wonderful and people letting him get away with it.
Well, I guess him and his brother from CNN, Chris Cuomo, can do a show just telling each other how wonderful they both are. The same day that he had this fundraiser, I think it was $10,000 a person or minimum, correct? That's the same day he ordered everyone to lock in. If it wasn't for the snowstorm, we'd have all the restaurants and the bars are closed, even though, and obviously our schools, which I think should be open. That's a joke, even though there's no stats really, or the lowest stats on people dying from COVID-19 as a result of going out and having dinner. It just is so egotistical, the both of them. So what do you think? What was the outcome on the hearings that you had on Albany, Janice?
No outcome.
No, nothing at all.
No outcome.
No outcome.
No, I think it was not at all. No. And it's so disappointing. I know that there are some leaders that would really like to help and really like to get some answers. But, I asked them, I said, what what are the chances of this bill to go through and get the total number of senior deaths and find out why there was COVID positive patients put into nursing homes. And even if the bill went to the floor, he could veto it. So it was just political theater, unfortunately.
We talked about, I just want the folks to know that Andrew Cuomo, Governor Andy Cuomo, his award was from the International Academy of Television, Arts, and Science. It's embarrassing. I don't know where we're going. It's if anyone should be on the cover of Man of the Year, you know who I'm talking about. It should be Donald Trump in regard to his warp speed in the vaccine that's available now. I mean, just your opinion on that.
Well, I am. It was quite interesting that the governor, when the vaccine was introduced, that Governor Cuomo said that he didn't trust the vaccine and that he didn't want New Yorkers to take the vaccine because he was concerned because it was because of Trump.
Yes.
So that's my thought about that. The fact that he's, doing a complete 180 now because, Biden is going to be the president. Now, I guess he thinks that the vaccines are safe.
Aside from his directive, which we touched on a moment ago, ordering COVID-19 people to go into these healthcare facilities, nursing homes, whatever, and that's his style. That's his background. I knew his dad personally. His father and I were personal political friends. I always say political. He wasn't a close friend of mine. We ran on the same line for office, 1982, before you were born. So we go back. Him and his dad go back quite a way. And I'm going to, with Ray here, my main producer director, I'm going to do a special on. I'm giving you the first tip on this. I'm going to do a special on my conversation with Mario Cuomo in regard to his son, Andrew Cuomo. This is going to shock a lot of people. And then again, it may not. And you can relate to, because your husband is a New York City fireman. You are really a New Yorker. Your thoughts are highly regarded, by the way. You may not realize it or know it, but it's sad because it came the tough way where you had to get this recognition. But your opinion is worth something, and I think so. Can you give my audience, or our audience, your thoughts on what's going to happen in New York City, because New York City is destroyed, and you're a New Yorker like I am. Where do you think we're heading from this point on, Janice Dean?
Well, I'm grateful that the vaccine is happening, and we have 3 companies that have a vaccine. I mean, the fact that it happened so quickly. I mean, obviously, you have to give props to the president and his administration for making that happen. I think, people love to point fingers at the president, but you look at other countries who are going through a second surge and, can you blame Trump for their problems with coronavirus, and Canada and Europe and, Sweden, all of these other places that are going through the same thing that we're going through. I believe, it's gotten very divisive, and people are either on one side or the other, and there seems no way for compromise anymore, or people don't want to hear about the issues of what's happening in New York. They're only concerned with what's happening in their own backyard. So I worry that we are losing some civility here. And I am not a political person. I enjoy doing weather, and I've always said I only see red and blue on the map as areas of high pressure and low pressure. So to find myself in sort of this weird advocacy position to try to get answers is not comfortable for me. And it's not something I enjoy doing. And looking down the road, I haven't gotten answers now. I know that the Department of Justice has an investigation. Whether or not that proves fruitful, I'm not sure. I've stumbled on a lot of roadblocks, and I'll continue doing what I can. But at this point, to be honest with you, I do think he will get away with this.
He has a terrible track record, himself. So he's not a good guy. He's just a bad, evil guy, and it just bugs me for him to get this award. Plus, and he said it a moment ago, and he's in love with himself, pats himself on the back, and it's so mind-boggling. You think New York is gone with no Broadway theaters, no restaurants. You can't go out where they want to lock us in. The kids can't go to school. I'd love to get your thoughts on this if I can, Janice Dean.
I think New York will come back, but it's going to take leadership. I hope that this governor isn't reelected. Obviously de Blasio, there's going to be a new person coming in when he leaves. I think we can bring it back. I mean, New York has had tough times over the decades, but this one's going to be tough because 1/3 of small businesses are not operating anymore, and restaurants can't do it. And if he continues to close restaurants, I don't know how they survive. I have many friends that have moved out of Manhattan and are now living in the suburbs. They've moved to Connecticut or Long Island. And so they're saying their piece by leaving. So if you have enough people doing a mass exodus of the city, you're going to have a really hard time bringing them back. Right. It's going to take some time, and it's going to take new leadership, quite frankly.
Now, I got to talk about something that folks don't know about you, Janice Dean, and I do. On the lighter side, right? We got to talk about. Let's let our audience know who's Freddie the Frogmaster.
Aw. Well, I'm glad you asked.
Okay.
I wrote a series of children's books over the last. Well, let's see. The first Freddie was 2013. And that was about a frog in a thunderstorm. And then I did a book about the big blizzard, Freddie the Frogcaster and the Big Blizzard, Freddie the Frogcaster and the Huge Hurricane, Freddie the Frogcaster and the Terrible Tornado, and then Freddie the Frogcaster and the Flash Flood.
Right.
And my purpose was to teach kids about weather. There wasn't a lot of kids' weather books out there. And parents would always tell me, like, Janice Dean, how do I explain what a thunderstorm is? Or how do I explain where snow comes from? So I thought that this was a good opportunity to write books where it's a fun little story about a frog who loves forecasting the weather. And at the same time, educate them in the science of what happens in the atmosphere when we have all of these big weather stories. And it's been great. I've had so much success with those books. And I love going out. I can't wait till the pandemic is over, because one of my favorite things to do is to go out to schools and talk to kids about weather. It's one of my favorite things to do.
We take the weather for granted. We just look out the window. If it's snowing like it was yesterday, we say, oh, it's snowing. Otherwise, I have folks, I got to just touch on these books, and you should go out and now that you're locked in, and when you're locked in with your children, I'm just going to name I might be off a little bit on some of the titles of Janice Dean's great weather books that's educational as well for the kids and even myself, because I wouldn't know the difference between a hurricane and a tornado if it hit me. So Freddie the Frogmaster and the Flash Flood, Freddie the Frogmaster and the Terrible Tornado, and Ricky the Rock That Couldn't Roll. That's great for kids. Kids will love that. Freddie the Frogmaster, and I think it's the Huge Hurricane. Am I right?
Yep.
The Huge Hurricane, and Freddie the Frogmaster and the Big Blizzard. Folks, if you buy these books, okay. Now I think they'll draft something, a book, Mostly Sunny. Is that it? Mostly Sunny and Keep Smiling, right?
Yep. That came out almost 2 years ago, and that's a memoir. So that's just about how I, got my job at Fox News and the career that I've had, and how I met my husband and my 2 children. And that came out about 2 years ago, but I have one that I'm really excited about that's coming out in March. And it's called Make Your Own Sunshine. And it's not about me, and it's not about a frog, but it is about regular everyday people doing kind things for others. And I'm so proud of this book, because especially in dark times like we're going through right now, it's because of the kindness of others and the light that they shine in moments of darkness that really get us through these really challenging moments.
Yeah.
And the people that I write about are just angels here on earth. So maybe when that comes out, I can come on your show again and we can talk about that.
I will. I love this title because we desperately need this. Mostly sunny. Keep smiling. I want to thank you for these great books because I have kids and nephews and nieces and keep going that who out there looking for these books because it's just. Why did you choose to be a meteorologist or a weather gal? And
well, I started out in broadcasting. I took radio and television in school, and I started my career in radio. And I will always have a love of radio. I mean, not that I don't love doing television, but there's something very personal talking and people just listening to your voice and being able to tell a story, and you use your imagination to fill in the blanks when you're hearing the stories from radio. So I loved my career in radio, but I always did television on the side. And right out of college, I had a program director say to me, I like you on TV. Have you ever done the weather before? And I said, no, I've never done the weather before. And I didn't know if I would have an interest in it. But back then, way back then, you didn't need to have all of the fancy credentials that you need now to do the weather. So back then at home in Canada, which is where I was born and I was brought up, I was a weather presenter on the side with my radio career. So when I came to New York, I was doing both radio and television. And when the opportunity came up to work at Fox, they needed a weather person. They needed a weather presenter. And while I was at Fox, I went back and did my schooling to become a broadcast meteorologist. So I went back to school, and that took me 3.5 years. So I kind of did it backwards, but I love it. I love doing the weather. I can't imagine myself really doing anything else because, and the thing that I love the most, and I can't wait to get back to, is when I'm on Fox and Friends, I get to be outside with the crowds and I get to experience the weather and talk about the weather. So that's what I really love the most. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a political person. I don't really feel like I want to have a voice on politics. I just really enjoy what I do, giving the forecast. And on Fox and Friends, we can do all sorts of other stuff like celebrate National Cheeseburger Day and National Ice Cream Day. And those are the things that I really love to do.
It must be fun, being with Fox and Friends. Folks, that's who she's with. I mentioned she's a co-host, but I just left out that she's a co-host with Fox and Friends and a great audience. But good days and bad days, good weather and bad weather. Do people yell at you? And I if we're going to get snow or rain,
I always say, be nice to your local forecasters because we want to get it right. We don't want to get the forecast wrong. We're the last people that want to get the forecast wrong. And especially with the last storm that we had with the snow, actually forecasters did very well with that storm. And snow is one of the hardest things to forecast. Wow. Because I know, and there have been many times where we've said, we're going to have many inches of snow. And then the next morning you wake up and there's like a slushy inch, So, listen, you have to have a thick skin. There are always going to be people who complain about stuff. But I always say, the complainers in life are the ones that I feel sorry for because they're not looking at the sunny side of things. And if you're yelling at people because they got the forecast wrong, you got to look at your life and wonder what's really the big issues in your life that you have to take it, you have to take it out on the weather person.
Right. So, so it's not an easy job, I'm sure. Your prediction? How's our winter just started to a degree with a very snowstorm, at least here in New York. Can we get a tip of how the rest of the winter is going to look up until springtime?
I always say I don't like looking past 5 days. Past 5 days is a flip of a coin, to be quite honest with you. Yeah. Looking ahead to Christmas, we're going to start to get a little bit warmer. So any kind of storm is maybe not going to be as potentially a blockbuster that we had. But you know what? Sometimes the early storms are a harbinger of things to come. And that's not based on any kind of scientific knowledge, but it's sort of, when you look historically, there is something to that, that if there's an early storm early on in the season, sometimes more often than not, that's kind of a bellwether of perhaps more in the future.
Like a tip, it's like a little tip off or something, or a little prediction, or sort of.
Maybe. Yeah, I kind of think so. I'm hoping for a snowy winter. My kids and my husband went out yesterday and went sledding all day long. And it was just kind of a nice old-fashioned, snowstorm where the next day you get out and you enjoy it. And there's something about just connecting with nature that's really special.
Hopefully mostly sunny, and keep smiling. Better days ahead of us. Janice Dean, and thank your husband for his service as a New York City fireman.
Thank you, my friend. Thanks for having me on. And to all your listeners and your viewers, I appreciate your prayers and your thoughts. And I God bless you too, my friend. You have better days ahead.
Better days ahead. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. Janice Dean, folks, great guest, and I hope you watch everyone, on Fox and Friends. All right, folks, I want to thank you for listening to Streetwise. I'm glad you were able to listen to Janice Dean and her tragic loss, and many of us, and Ray Bettinelli had a tragic loss as well when he lost his dad. And he's got a great, when I say great, I don't know what else to say, tribute to his dad out there on social media. So look for that as well. Folks, again, thanks for listening or watching Streetwise. This is Lou Telano, and I'll catch you later.